I know, Brian, I know people are not going to believe this, but they followed up a match where anything goes with another match where anything goes. But this time it wasn't sanctioned. So Tony and his father and Megan and all of the officials can't get sued if anything bad happens, except for the fans. Something bad happened to the fans. They got the stink bored out of them.
Can I say something before you review this match?
Please do.
This was one of the worst matches I've ever seen in my entire life. And I mean it. I'm not just saying that. This was one of the worst matches I've ever seen in my life.
And I mean, now that's only slightly hyperbolic because we have seen videotape of, untrained goofballs on a show in a basement somewhere in front of 6 people that technically you could probably say was a worse match, but I don't think I've ever seen anything as bad in front of people, real people, serious people, broadcast.
The fans went silent. They were like, what are we supposed to do?
I know it was like they were in suspended animation. It was like, what the fuck is going on in front of us? And they were just staring. I mean, again, they were sending people around with mirrors to hold them in front of fucking fans' faces to see if they were still breathing.
It was so awkwardly quiet that at one point I couldn't tell. I'm like, does Adam Cole always move like this and I've never noticed it? Or is it because the fans are so silent? It seems like he's taking extra steps and doing things he doesn't need to do. There was so much silence, it kind of impeded upon everything in the match.
And I noted, by the way, Jim Ross was on color. I forgot that he worked there. But he was back, and he was reasonably listenable, unlike the normal commentary, for a few matches. And then suddenly I noticed he was gone. And we never heard from him again.
For the most part, I found Jim Ross enjoyable. It was a relief to see him come out there. The commentary is awful. Excalibur was excruciatingly awful on this entire broadcast. It was painful. It was so bad. But Jim Ross, the problem is, when you tell people that this is the best Chris Jericho's ever been, when you say this match is guaranteed to be a classic.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I don't like. I like Jim Ross, everything he says, except don't build up shit that makes you look like a liar.
Well, they did prove him wrong in that instance. So it's an unsanctioned match. Anything goes. Lazy booking. Adam Cole versus Chris Jericho. Cole has Roderick Strong and Sabu in his corner. And Jericho has allegedly.
No, I'm sorry. I got to stop you. At one point, the best line was Jim Ross during the match, and he was kind of ignored by the other commentators. He says, "Isn't Sabu the referee?"
Yeah. They meant Mark Briscoe was going to be the referee later on, but Sabu was
special enforcer. What is that?
I don't know. And then nobody else knew either. Jericho had the Four Stooges, everybody that's not Sammy Guevara and his little group of idolaters or appreciators or whatever they are.
Idolaters.
And as soon as they all got down there, they all started fighting. The seconds too. Everybody was just broke out in a fight. And the Stooges got on Adam Cole, and then Jericho and Sabu got in the ring and stood there with the chairs forever. And then did the fencing with the chairs. And then Jericho dropped his chair and he got bumped out, and Sabu climbed up to the top and more or less just fell off the top rope out onto the floor and put one of the heels through a table, who was conveniently laying there waiting for it. So Tony Khan was back there loving it, and Sabu's had multiple health issues. He's in his 50s. He's nearly died. He's had injury after injury. Just to relive a moment of your childhood. I mean, seriously, when I brought Jackie Fargo to the Louisville Gardens, when he was a little bit older than Sabu and probably in much better shape, I didn't ask him to take any bumps through furniture because he did it 30 years before, right?
What if he asked you if he could do it?
He wouldn't have. That's one thing he would have not asked. Hey, can I take a bump? Are you out of your... He didn't ask that when he was in the business. So anyway, so the guys that were supposed to be in this match fighting are not fighting at this point. But then somehow, Brian, you know what they did? All of them, everybody, all of the Sabu, the special star, and all of the seconds, and everybody that were having this giant Donnybrook, they just fought off, and they were gone. And then Jericho and Cole start this match, and immediately they go out to the floor. And they weren't having a wrestling match or a fight. They were just doing slow-paced, garbage wrestling on the outside, wouldn't get in the ring. And the fans were just sitting there and staring. And then they got in the ring, and I made note that Jericho is wearing brand new designer concrete boots. It's like they were in fucking jelly. And then at one point, he got the walls of Jericho, and Adam eventually, after teasing it and you knowing it was coming, and them having a camera shot of it for ages, and the announcers talking about it, he did the fire extinguisher spot. But he had already, it was there, it was in the shot. He waited, then he pulled it in, and everybody saw it, and he waited, and it finally
And it was so awkward just the way he was hanging out, too. I mean, Jericho was like on an angle, and he was sitting like on the rope was involved, and Cole was all the way out of the ring.
Yeah, and then he pulled him in, and Jericho had to turn around and look to the right so he could hit him in the face with the spray. And then he picked it up and hit Jericho with it, but you can't work with a fire extinguisher. Not one that size. So it looked like shit. And then suddenly Jericho gets a kendo stick. But here comes Britt Baker and gets in the ring and wears him out with the kendo stick. Just beats a bejesus out of him. And then here comes Saraya and beats Britt Baker up. And then they fought off. And you didn't see them anymore. And then more nothing happened, where they were just laying around breathing. And then Adam Cole gets up on the top rope, and Jericho chucks the chair at him, and it hits him, and he falls off the top rope through another table out on the floor. Adam Cole has just returned from almost a year out injured with concussions. And in the worst match in recorded history, he's taking a chair to the head and falling through a table off the top rope.
And everything was in slow motion and everything was telegraphed. It was such a bad match.
And I wrote, nobody cares about any of this, but they're leaving nothing for anyone else later either. So it's a double whammy. And then they got a chain out, a 20-foot chain with cuffs on either end of it. And Jericho cuffed one end on Adam Cole, but Adam Cole fought back and put the other end on Jericho, and now it was a chain match. And then Cole botched a Panama Sun. Well, I don't know who botches a Panama Sunrise, because it really doesn't make any sense anyway. The Canadian destroyer off the thing, is it the flipper or the flippy? You can't tell who that is anyway. But point being, instead of going all the way over, they kind of just did a fucking back bump wham, one guy on top of the other guy. And I believe that's where Jericho got his eye split open. Or at least I didn't ever see any blood, but it was red at the end and it was black later. So he got probably one of the links of the chain to the face, smashed by a body on top of him, because they're trying to fucking do backflips over each other when they're tied up with a fucking logging chain, and one of the participants is a fucking 53-year-old man. Is it 55 or 52 you can get AARP?
I have no idea.
I got it, but I can't remember because it's been so long ago. But if it's 52, I'm calling him AAR Jericho. Anyway, so at that point, that's when referee Aubrey Ed pulled out the black gloves and put them on her front hooves, because we did have some kind of blood in there somewhere. But anyway, so Jericho whips Cole with the chain, but that, of course, looked phony and fake too, because it's too heavy to work with and you can't do it believably, at least not in the way they were doing it. I could have given them a few suggestions, but I wasn't even there. So then, the finish came when Cole got on Jericho. He hit a knee with the chain wrapped around his knee. And then he got on Jericho and he was doing fake punches with the chain because you can't, again, the chain is way too big and too heavy to work with it believably. And also, if you did hit somebody hard, it would break your fucking fingers because it's too big and heavy. But then he switched hands and had to throw barehanded punches with the left hand because Jericho hadn't thought ahead and handcuffed Cole's right arm. So Cole couldn't fucking throw regular punches with the right hand without bringing the chain down on top of Jericho, who's already been fucking potatoed with it anyway. So he throws fake punches with the left hand to the top of Jericho's head or wherever the fuck in the vicinity of Jericho. And then Aubrey just stops it. She says, "Nay! Nay, no more." And the crowd booed because it looked so bad. The crowd booed the babyface beating the heel into submission until the referee stopped it. Have you ever heard that before? They were booing the fucking shitty looking finish.
They were waiting for anything to like about this match and it never came. And then this finish was one of the all-time bad finishes. And it certainly didn't make anyone happy, and the fans let them. That woke the fans up.
I mean, my God. And this also went so long. It was an hour into the show, these first two events, the Battle Royal and this, but it cut half the time, cut all of the outside bullshit, and keep up a bit of a pace, and goddamn have a, I mean, they didn't channel Tully Blanchard Magnum TA, they channeled fucking Ian Rotten and dipshit McGee. Just the worst things about bad indie garbage wrestling. And their smoke and mirrors made no sense. With the multiple man fight at the beginning and the fucking girls running in. At least later on, Jeff Jarrett's smoke and mirrors made some sense. Still was a little overdone, but this was, people were at some points actually interested, whereas this was, if anybody wanted to go to the concession stand or take a piss or whatever, they would have been happy to have this match. Otherwise, I can't imagine this thrilled anybody in that building.
This was one of the worst matches ever. Chris Jericho looked awful in this. Adam Cole, and I feel bad saying this kind of thing because everyone tells me he's the nicest guy ever.
He is. He is.
But he's too skinny to be a wrestler. It's not even skinny. He looks frail. At one point when Jericho had him in the Boston Crab and you could see his midsection, like his shirt was like halfway, you see how skinny he is. And I'm sorry, you could hit as many super kicks as you want. More than anyone you can name on that roster, the Young Bucks, Orange Cassidy, whoever you want to name. I don't believe he could beat anybody. It's ridiculous, and I don't think this is something that's going to get better as he gets older, because he never looked imposing, but he doesn't look in as good a shape as he did a few years ago.
He looked athletic. The size was his drawback. He can talk, he can work, he can do things. He's a very intelligent kid. But he looked somehow conditioned. And the only reason, because I know how he's a great guy, and I know how determined he was to get better in the wrestling business when I worked with him years ago. And I can't, I hesitate to actually come out and blister him, because I got to think It's got to be something to do with his health, because elsewise he wouldn't have just completely given up. Tan, drink milkshakes, go to the gym. Whatever the fuck. He's never going to look like Luger.
No, but Jericho's
a little
not
weight and a little tone and a little tan.
Jericho's not the biggest guy in the world, and he looked twice the size of Cole.
Like Dick the Bruiser.
Yeah. And, I'm watching this match and I'm watching him go toe to toe, and it just doesn't seem in any way believable. And this feud hasn't done anyone any favors. Adam Cole comes out of it looking awful because the Britt Baker angle was really poorly done. And everything else in this hasn't been good. And then it had the worst match of all time here. Hopefully this is the end of them working together.
Well, no. You didn't hear later on?
Oh, no, they have the mixed match on Dynamite. We get more.
Yes, to contradict every rule of logic and law of gravity in the history of the wrestling business, they did an angle on a pay-per-view to come back with the match on free TV.
Can you imagine? You know what? I got to say, though, I forget when it was. You'll go through the matches and I'll realize it, but at one point during the show, it hit me. Like, this doesn't even feel like an AEW pay-per-view. Like, there have been pay-per-views where there have been matches I really liked. There have been pay-per-views of matches I didn't like, but they felt like a big deal. This felt like a supersized Dynamite or Rampage.
No, you know what this was? This was an independent show with a promoter that just won the lottery, and he started a company, and we've seen him before over the last 30 years. They were the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view from, where was it? Bay St. Louis or whatever, where they get enough money to put on a big show and they hire some names, but it's still garbage indie wrestling and nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. And some of the people that might don't care because they're getting paid. That's what it looked like. Except this is going on and on and on. For the people who don't know what we were referring to a minute ago, later on, Jericho and Saraya do a promo and challenge Adam and Britt to a mixed tag team match on Dynamite this coming Wednesday. So, as I said, for the first time ever in the history of fucking wrestling, they did an angle on a pay-per-view to lead to a gimmick match on free television instead of the other way around. And honestly, the mixed tag would probably have had more interest and drawn more revenue, whether it be tickets or pay-per-view buys or whatever the case, than this fucking fiasco they had on the pay-per-view, because it was an anything goes match in a company full of anything goes matches. Jericho and Cole were not going to do anything different, even if this was good. It still would have been different. But having Britt and Saraya partners with Cole and Jericho might tickle a few people's taints just because it's a little bit more different. So they're going to give that one away on TV.